Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is January 27th, day 479, since October 7th, 2023. As it's Monday, I have lots of news, and I'll try to summarize things quickly about what's happening in the Middle East. The Hezbollah-Israel ceasefire deal was set to expire over the weekend. So what happened with that? There was news this morning that at least 24 people were killed. According to reports, Lebanese residents were shot at by Israeli forces as they tried to return to their homes, despite having been warned that Israeli troops had not yet withdrawn. The Washington Post reported that at least 24 people, including a Lebanese soldier, were killed. 134 were injured by Israeli fire. According to a Lebanese health ministry spokesperson, the Israeli Defense Forces said that Hezbollah sent agitators to South Lebanon in order to inflame tensions. In their statement, the IDF said they fired warning shots at suspects who approached their troops. Yesterday, on Sunday afternoon, the White House announced that the Hezbollah-Israel ceasefire is to be extended. That will stay in place until February 18th. It was supposed to expire this past weekend. The White House statement did not indicate whether or not both parties had agreed to the extension, but the chief of Hezbollah responded and said that they do not agree for the reasons that Israel has given for why they are unable to withdraw at this time. You'll recall that both Israel and Hezbollah, according to the deal, are required to move their forces out of South Lebanon. Hezbollah is supposed to move north of the Litani River. Israel is supposed to withdraw back into Israel. And then Lebanese army and peacekeeping forces would move in to take their place. But this is yet to happen, as Israel requested initially at least a month delay. That was denied by the White House. So the February 18th extension seems to be a bit of a compromise. In terms of U.S. engagement with Gaza, President Trump made an announcement over the weekend saying in a conversation he had with Jordan's King Abdullah II about his intentions to clean out Gaza and urging Jordan and Egypt to, quote, take on about 1.5 million refugees from the territory. Jordan's foreign minister responded yesterday saying that Jordan is opposed to the Gaza refugee transfer plan that has been floated by the Trump team or Trump himself. He said that Jordan is firm and unwavering. That's the foreign minister of Jordan, Safadi. Separately, Egypt's foreign ministry reiterated its position of standing against the displacement of Palestinians from their land through forced eviction. That's a quote from Egypt's foreign minister. Purchase for Middle East Peace completely opposes the displacement of the Palestinian people of Gaza. The White House Friday instructed the Pentagon to release the former Biden administration's hold on the supply of the 2,000-pound bombs to Israel, according to Israeli officials. And Israel's actions in the occupied West Bank are imperiling the Gaza ceasefire, according to the UN Human Rights Office spokesperson. They added that the Israeli security forces killed at least 12 Palestinians in Jenin in the occupied West Bank since last Tuesday. Secretary of State Mark Rubio on Friday halted spending on most of the existing foreign aid grants for at least 90 days. This excluded Egypt and Israel, but it included other allies like Ukraine, Taiwan, and Jordan in the Middle East. Some might argue that the funds are being withheld to pressure Jordan into taking Palestinians from Gaza. Of course, King Abdullah is opposed to that. The state of Jordan is opposed to it. It's unlikely that Jordan will bend on that issue. The Senate on Friday confirmed Pete Hegseth as the Secretary of Defense. This was a 51-50 vote. Vice President Vance cast the tie-breaking vote. That, of course, the Defense Secretary will play a significant part in the Middle East in months forward. And then today in Gaza, Israel and Hamas reached an agreement to release 3 hostages by next Friday in order to permit thousands of Palestinians to return to their homes in the north of Gaza. That was reached at 7 a.m. In Middle East time. This was confirmed by Qatari and Israeli officials. The move followed it says the fragile ceasefire's biggest test to date. So Israeli soldiers yesterday prevented Gazans from moving north, which is a part of the ceasefire agreement. I'll talk a bit more about why that is. Tens of thousands of Palestinians were jubilant to be returning homes. after months of living in temporary shelters, but fearing what might remain, if anything, of their homes amid the bombed-out ruins. Israel gave the green light for the movement north. Palestinians say there's about 650,000 people ready to move. After that announcement, later today, Gaza's Hamas authorities said that 300 people have already crossed into Gaza City and the north edge of the enclave. Many of those displaced have been displaced multiple times, as Israel has designated different parts of Gaza as humanitarian zones and then cleaned them out in order to bomb those areas and have ground operations there. Much of Gaza, of course, now lies in ruins. The government media office said that the returnees to the north need at least 135,000 tents and shelters as they seek to reestablish any semblance of their lives in the rubble-strewn landscape of the north of Gaza. As a part of that agreement to the north, Hamas has agreed to free the Israeli civilian who was originally supposed to be freed this last weekend. Her name is Arbel Yehud. She and two others, this is including a female soldier named Agam Berger and another hostage, will be released on Thursday, 2 days before the next scheduled release of hostages on Saturday. So that was a part of the negotiations to allow Palestinians to return back to the north. Gaza has rejected, Gazans and Palestinians have totally rejected Trump's proposal that they leave the enclave. Today, a Hamas official told Reuters that the group handed over to mediators a list that shows that 25 of the 33 hostages that are scheduled for the release during this first phase are alive. Israeli authorities previously had said there were grave concerns about the lives of Shiri Bibas and her two sons. Now, or I guess at the time of being taken captive, they were aged 4 and 10 months. They were abducted from kibbutz Nir Oz on October 7th. It still remains unknown whether or not Shiri and the Bibas children are alive or dead. Only 339 aid trucks entered into Gaza on Friday, according to the UN OSHA office. This is a significant drop from the amount of trucks that were allowed in the first couple of days. And Israel on Friday gave the UN Agency for Palestinians, UNRWA, 6 days to stop all of their operations in East Jerusalem, according to a letter from Israel's UN ambassador to the UN Secretary General. The Israeli army over the weekend on Saturday raided the home of Hamas member who was released as a part of the exchange deal for Israeli hostages. One person was detained, several others were assaulted, according to a New York Times report. Hamas has recruited between 10,000 and 15,000 members since the start of the war in October 2023. This is roughly the same number of fighters that has been killed during that period, according to 2 congressional sources that were briefed on U.S. intelligence. Shifting gears to talk a bit about the Houthis in Yemen. On Friday, the Houthis detained 7 UN personnel. This prompted the suspension of all UN staff movement in Houthi-held areas, according to the Secretary General, who's calling for those detainees to be immediately released. And then the Houthis on Saturday released 153 prisoners with the support of the International Committee from the Red Cross. The identities were not disclosed. Shifting to Syria, the U.S. has been sharing secret intelligence on threats from the Islamic State with the current government of Syria, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham leadership. Itself, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, is still designated as a terrorist group by Washington. And Syria's HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, their administration canceled a contract with a Russian firm to manage and operate the country's Tartus port, according to Syrian businessmen and media reports. The contract is separate from an agreement governing the Russians' naval presence in the port. Preparations are also underway for the first ever return of the Al-Hal camp detainees to areas inside of Syria. That's in the northeast, said the Syrian Democratic Forces, who back the camp director. Finally, today marks International Holocaust Remembrance Day and the commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the day that Auschwitz was liberated on January 27th, 1945. Auschwitz survivors warned of the dangers of rising anti-Semitism today as they marked their 80th anniversary and the liberation of the death camp by Soviet troops, and they said that this is one of the last such gatherings of those who are still alive that experienced those horrors. 56 survivors were gathered over a gate and railway tracks at the site of the former camp. Many participants expect it will be their last major observance with any notable number of survivors, given how exhausting it is for a group of that age whose youngest members are in their 80s. The numbers have dwindled considerably. The 75th anniversary event had 200 survivors, and the event today had 56. Auschwitz survivors also were joined by numerous world leaders at the 80th anniversary of the liberation. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and the author of Man's Search for Meaning and many other books, writes profoundly about the human experience. One of his famous quotes is this: "Everything can be taken from a man but one last thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given circumstances, to choose one's own way." Frankl also said that human kindness can be found in all groups, even those which as a whole would be easy to condemn. The boundaries between such groups can be overlapped, and we must not try to simplify matters by saying that these men were angels and these were devils. So we have a lot to learn from his experience and the experience of so many others who survived the horrors of the Holocaust. We remember them today on this International Holocaust Remembrance Day and seek to learn from their lives and their memory. Another well-known writer and survivor of the Holocaust is Elie Wiesel, who wrote the book Night and several other books. He says in his closing remarks from the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, "Yit Gadal Be'et Kadash Shemei Rabbah," which means magnified and sanctified be his great name. And Weitzel says this in his closing words: "Weep for thy children whose death was not mourned then. Weep for them, our Father in heaven, for they were deprived of their right to be buried, for heaven itself became their cemetery." And I close with those words: for all of the children lost during the Holocaust, all of the children lost in subsequent wars and violence since, including on October 7th, 2023, and the months since then, the thousands of children who've been killed in Gaza. Weep for thy children whose death was not mourned then. Weep for them, our Father in heaven, for they were deprived of their right to be buried, for heaven itself became their cemetery. May God continue to go before us towards peace. Amen.